Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to all, and welcome to this webinar to present the new World Maritime University research on evaluating the maritime regulatory framework on rest and work hours. My name is Katie Higginbottom. I'm the head of the ITF Seafarers Trust. We are the funding organisation for this project. So we have a very tight programme for you this afternoon. So let me immediately pass the floor to Dr. Cleopatra Doumbia Henry, President of the World Maritime University, for some opening remarks.
Well, good afternoon, dear friends of mine, wonderful friends from the ITF, dear alumni of WMU, dear colleagues of the International Maritime Organization, IMO, a mother institution, representatives of national maritime administrations, dear all. I wish to welcome you to this very special webinar on work and rest hours for seafarers. Your presence today is an important reflection of the interest and at the same time, the concern that you have with respect to hours of work and hours of rest. There ought to be two sides, there ought to be two sides of the same coin. However, in practice, there is still much to be desired to ensure safe, secure, and efficient shipping on clean oceans. During this webinar, we will share with you the outcome of the research which was commissioned and funded by the ITF Seafarers Trust and undertaken by my colleagues at the World Maritime University. Hours of work and hours of rest are among the most important themes addressed by the IMO in the framework of hours of rest under the STCW Convention, and of course by the ILO in the Maritime Labour Convention 2006 as amended with respect to provisions relating to hours of work. The combination of the two areas deal with the very sensitive issue of seafarers' workload and the implementation of the work and rest hours on board ships. The research that was conducted is explained in the report that has been prepared by the WMU at the request of the ITF Seafarers Trust. I wish to thank the ITF Seafarers Trust for the trust that they have, they have had with respect to the work undertaken by the colleagues here at WMU. I'm very proud of them, actually. I invite you to read that report and certainly to share it among yourselves and your colleagues and the rest of the maritime industry to ensure that change is made and that the respect for hours of rest and hours of work are actually implemented in not just in the law that we know exists, but also in practice. The research that was conducted is explained in the report. And since my many years at the ILO, the issue of working time at sea have always been something very close to my heart. Close to my heart because regulations on working time are at the core of decent work and impact seafarers' occupational safety and health, as well as their well-being. With an immediate impact, of course, if it is not respected, on ship operations, ship safety, and of course, ship security. And as we know, ship safety is highly dependent on the cognitive capacity of seafarers, which can be impaired by excessive workload and inadequate number of hours of rest. Against the backdrop of the COVID-19 crisis, which has dramatically affected seafarers and continues to do so, our research highlights the structural problem that we are facing in shipping and which the pandemic is laying bare. In addition to the long hours of work on board ship, seafarers have found themselves unable to disembark from their ships for many, many months at sea, often well in excess of the established 11 months period on board provided for by the MLC 2006. An estimate figure of certainly over 400 crew members are still denied the right to repatriation, and many of them are also denied the right to access shore-based facilities and even to medical care, rights which are essential considering the importance of occupational safety and health, as well as seafarers' well-being. Long hours of work without sufficient rest, the small size of crew on board, and due to COVID-19, the very long periods at sea are worsening the safety, health, and well-being of our seafarers and giving rise to increased fatigue. And we know sometimes dramatically suicide. Shareholders are also acknowledging the increase, stakeholders, are also acknowledging the increase in accidents and the substantial impact of the COVID-19 crisis on seafarers' physical and mental health. If these issues are not addressed as a matter of urgency, shipping might well soon experience major casualties. This can also lead to more serious structural problems, namely with respect to the retention of seafarers in the industry. It is my hope that the report that has been prepared by my colleagues and that's presented here today, and the outcomes of that research that it contains, can significantly contribute to the improvement of working and living conditions at sea, ensure ship safety, and protect the marine environment. I wish to take this opportunity to express, on behalf of the World Maritime University, our deepest gratitude and appreciation for the trust that you have placed in us in the preparation of this study, and the appreciation as well to all seafarers and maritime professionals, including those on this very panel, whom I can see very well, friends of mine that I've known for many years, and who are fully engaged in seeking to address the issue of fatigue at sea and in bringing to an end, of course, to the humanitarian crisis caused by COVID-19 and to which our seafarers are largely exposed. Allow me particularly to thank the panelists from the IMO, from Intermanager, ITF, Nautilus, and CHIRP, who have accepted to provide the expertise on how we can promote the effective implementation of regulations on work and rest hours. We also invite you to provide us with your views on the research that has been undertaken and on how particularly the outcomes of such a research project can be taken forward in the interest of seafarers and the maritime industry as a whole. It must not be another piece of research that lies on the shelves. It must be put into action. We must have a follow-up plan about what we plan to do and how we can do it with the industry to make sure it is effective, that it is implemented in not just in the spirit of the law, but in practice. As WMU, we will continue to collaborate with all the stakeholders and partners on this very important issue in support of enhanced maritime and ocean governance, which will underpin the fair treatment of seafarers. So dear friends, a very exciting piece of work has been done. We now need to take it from paper, from being on paper to being in practice. And I'm sure those of you that I see on that screen will ensure that we take the outcomes forward. And as WMU, we are prepared to play our own part in making sure, at least for our entire student body, that they don't go home without knowing how they should be able to make a small contribution to implementing work and rest hours at sea. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Cleo. Inspirational as always. So from our perspective as the Seafarers Trust, I absolutely want to concur that our interest is in supporting research that has practical application. And we're very excited about seeing this as a piece of work that encourages collaboration amongst stakeholders. So let me now invite Dr. Raphael Baumler, former shipmaster who holds a PhD in risk management and is currently the head of maritime safety and environmental administration specialization at World Maritime University. The floor is yours, Raphael.
Thank you very much, Katie. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much for the alumni for participating. Thank you very much for all maritime professionals that attend this meeting. And thank you very much again for all the panelists that took some of their time to join this very important webinar. So I'm going to present very fast because it's a very large report that we produced. After 1 year of research, we made a very large report, and it will be only the highlights because we really invite you to by yourself to read it and to take the most of it. So first of all, the origin of the work. Basically, a report and the research is starting from, there is always a starting point. For us, a starting point has been very much the problem of the human element in shipping in general. And also this constant convergence of research highlighting a problem of fatigue among seafarers. And again, there is also numerous casualty investigation pointing out fatigue as a contributor to marine accidents. So all this is very much the background of it. In addition to this, we brought another layer because since the beginning of the research on fatigue in general, there have been some major changes. It has been the entry into force of two major regulations, the STCW and the MLC 2006. And despite the entry into force of these two conventions, there is still evidence of fatigue among seafarers, and there is increasing evidence of even more fatigue since than before. So basically, we started to investigate something else because there is also the research pointing out that there is some underreporting and falsification of records happening on board the ships related to this particular item of rest hours. So we decided to investigate not only the fatigue aspect, but also more, I would say, the implementation of the regulation and what is the problem there. So the problem for us was very much to determine how can we assess this implementation? How can the implementation of regulations such as work and rest hours can be assessed? Therefore, we constructed a research methodology based on qualitative research to understand very much the practice, using as much stakeholders as possible. So we tried to have a lot of seafarers, of course, which was one of our main targets, but not only seafarers, because seafarers represent only a third of the person that we worked with. We really wanted to have a bigger and more diverse understanding of the situation. Therefore, we investigate also with a lot of posted control officers, flag state officers, some industry organizations, ship owners organizations, NGOs, and specific organizations such as casualty investigation boards. So we tried very much to have an open view of the situation. So after the method we've been through, it's basically we used a lot of semi-structured interviews, and we complemented the semi-structured interviews with focus groups and with a case study. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19, the number of case study has been limited, but we're still able to provide some case study, and one of them is available in the appendix of the report. So what is important now in terms of the outcome? The outcome of the research really clearly highlights basically there is a convergence with what is the previous research. We see this prevalence of fatigue across the industry, and it's a very clear trend that was reported before, which is still happening. We've seen also that many respondents highlighted that there is a problem in terms of standards itself. The standards themselves are not exactly supported by science, which is creating a problem here also of standards which are a little bit disconnected from the human capacity of being, I would say, always at the top of their cognitive and physical performance. There is also, again, highlighted by previous research, and here again strengthened, the idea that reduced manning and fatigue are connected, and they are all going hand in hand. Again, many respondents highlighted also the problem of the 6 on 6 off watch schedule with 2 watch keepers as a very serious concern. In addition to this fatigue concern that has been shared in many other research, it has been highlighted a widespread violations. In previous research, it was estimated that violation on the rest hours and work hours were about 60 to 70% of the records per month where there were violations, and there were adjustment of it. And we can go even beyond with the research method that we used. It has been highlighted that the records have been regularly forged, and this is a big problem that we will probably talk later on with all participants. And also a very important point is the inefficient feedback system. It has been reported that when we were asking seafarers, but also the other respondents, what is the communication between the ship and the company, it looks as this communication is very much broken in many cases. And when the ship are reporting some problem related to the implementation of hours and rest and hours of work, basically there is low level of response from most of the companies. Some companies respond, but it's not the majority. So what are the highlights now about the report? So one of the highlights has been very clearly highlighted by many respondents, I would say all respondents. It's the problem of the regulation itself. It's the problem that we have a regulation that can allow 91 to 98 hours of work per week. And according to one of the respondents, which is clearly stating that the scientific evidence will tell you that working 91 and 98 hours a week is not safe at all. So it's a very clear statement, and this statement has been reiterated many times by other organizations. Another comment very clear is about the 2 watch keepers only, which is a recipe for disaster. From here, this is from a casualty investigation board, showing very much that this link to fatigue and the regulation is very important to address. At the core of it, the respondent highlighted that the problem of violations and recording malpractice is related to insufficient manning level. What exactly means insufficient manning level? It means that the workload which is required on board the vessel and the number of people are not matching. The workload is too high for the number of people. Therefore, the people are trying to meet the workload, and they will work beyond what is normal hours and what is expected hours. So this is why there is regular violation, and this violation, they are hiding them by adjusting the records. So in short, we have a situation, we have a mismatch between workload and manning level. And this mismatch leads to violation. And because in the shipping context, the context of work is also very specific, and the social relationship between the company and the ship is such that it's creating a lack of support from the management because of a permanent mistrust, which has been always highlighted in previous research by other researchers. So it's generating an implicit and explicit signals to forge records. So basically the seafarers understand the incapacity of having support as, okay, let's forge records in order to demonstrate compliance. Therefore, the consequence of this situation and this context of lack of support makes that there is a consequence. Seafarers are making up records. They want to hide non-conformities. In fact, one of the respondents was clearly highlighting that the violations during any period will be adjusted in order to show compliance. So there is always this idea that when they record, they don't want to show any violation to any third-party inspection. So the idea is to eliminate any evidence that can be provided. So in short, it's developing a culture of adjustment, because what we've seen also with the respondents, seafarers group, but also port state control and the other categories of stakeholders that we worked with, there is a culture. It's a culture which is establishing slowly by slowly and which is becoming bigger and bigger. And it's a very worrying trend. So we were thinking about, we were trying to see, to understand why is it happening. In fact, it's very clearly stated also by many respondents that this type of recording system that we have today in terms of hours of work, regulations, but also other type of regulation is requiring manual input. And this manual input are very easy to adjust. And also what we were surprised to hear from many respondents is a software that have been developed to facilitate the recording are also made in a way which guides the seafarers to report. Basically, when the seafarer is inputting its hours in the computer, in the software will highlight the area in red that where you have violations. So instead of taking into consideration this aspect, the seafarers have the tendency to eliminate the areas which are red. So in this respect, the software are also guiding seafarers to adjust the records accordingly. Also, what we realize, it's because there is no response when there is violation or limited response to violations, seafarers consider basically the recording practices as a very burdensome process, a very bureaucratic activity, which is also pointless because there is no action if there is some reporting. So in fact, what we've seen is very much that the seafarers tend to pre or post adjust the hours of work in order to confirm compliance, because all the ideas for them is very much to show that there is no problem on their ship. So to avoid any violation which is becoming visible. Why they don't want to show non-compliance? Because they want to protect their ships. They want to avoid any disruption in the ship operation. So in fact, the seafarers, they violate the rules and they make up the records in order for the records to be clean, not seen, in order to protect the ships. Why they want to protect the ship by all means? Because if they protect the ship, they protect their own job, because they are living in a world of uncertainties in terms of job and employment conditions. So they fear very much sanction if something is becoming visible. But also, and we've seen from other participants and other seafarers, it's not only the fear of sanction, you have also the incentive to do it because there is some financial incentive. So for some of them, if there is no violation visible, basically there will be bonuses, extra overtime, etc. And there is also performance monitoring system in place in some companies through the KPI that makes some KPI dependent on the number of violations visible or not. So in short, what's happening? We have a situation where the seafarers seem very much unable to prioritize what is their allegiance. Is it to the law or is it to the ship interest? And basically what we see is very much the ship interest is going first. And the seafarers will have the tendency to adjust the records, even if it's detrimental to their own well-being. So here what we have the role after of the enforcement agencies. And what we've seen when we were discussing with the enforcement agency with a lot of port state control officers, we realized that in fact it's very difficult for them because there is a lot of limitation in the inspection regime today for verifying hours of work and hours of rest on ships. What is required is very minimalist. It's just to verify that the records are on board and they exist and they look good. There is no specific requirement except in case of clear grounds to go beyond the records and to assess the accuracy of the records. So basically, some port state control officers express also their frustration because they perfectly understood that there is a problem with fatigue and they can see it. But they stopped their investigation at the really beginning. In fact, there is also something that we realized when we were discussing with the port state control officers and some other enforcement agency, is they have all internalized that the ship is never to be stopped. And basically, nobody really wants to delay, as the port state control officer reported here on the quotation. Nobody wants to delay the vessel. 3-4 hours delay because they lose the window, tidal window, then they shut port, they also ask an answer. So basically the delay of the ship is also a big problem. And the fear of delaying a ship or undue delaying the ship is really something which is very important among the enforcement agencies. On the other side, we were asking to the port state control officer if it was easy to assess the accuracy of records. Basically, they were divided. Some of them said it was easy. Some of them said it's not so easy. But it's at the end, when we had the focus group, where we had all the port state control officers together, what we realized, it's quite easy if you want to invest in it. And what we had very much is from the port state control inspectors was, do they want to invest a lot of energy, a lot of effort to cross-check the information. And it was where it was a little bit complicated. But according to the seafarers, in fact, they consider that it's very easy to manipulate the records, but it's also very easy. On the other side, we have also seafarers that it's very easy also to assess if the record have been manipulated if you start cross-checking. And this cross-checking is not always obvious. So what is really one of the key points to remember? There is this normalization of deviance. I mean, what we realized during this research is seafarers, but not only seafarers, everybody in the maritime industry seems to really know that there is a problem. There is a problem. It has been clear from all respondents that they recognize that there is a problem in terms of adjustment of records. However, it seems to be completely accepted. It's a systemic acceptance of the existence of this violation. There is acceptance of violation, this idea of unbalance between workload and manning level. And also there is this acceptance that finally there is recording malpractice. It's becoming accepted by everybody in the industry. And this is quite worrying. And we've seen it from all the stakeholders that we had in the survey and in the research. So for all these elements, we really invite you to read the report where you will have a lot of details about it, a lot of evidence of this kind of elements. So in fact, for us, it shows an evidence of a systemic failure to implement this particular regulation, because basically there is a failure from the seafarers because they don't report accurately. So it's a failure from the seafarers, from the really micro level. And there is a failure also from the shipping companies who tend to neglect the seafarers' feedback, because we've investigated this link. When the seafarers are reporting to their company, manning difficulties, and what was the response or the non-response from the company. And we've seen there is a broken link here. So there is a problem of feedback from the company and the seafarers. There is also flag state. I mean, it has been highlighted from the beginning of this presentation, but the flag state are the one who are delivering the minimum safe manning. And basically what has been clearly highlighted by all the participants, it's probably we have a lot of problem in terms of how realistic are the manning level given to the ship compared to the workload which is demanded from the seafarers. And finally, what we realize with the other layer of enforcement by the port state control officers is basically the port state control officers are heavy loaded. They have a lot of things to investigate. And when they are coming on board the ship, they have long checklists, and there are so many items that they will take a lot of time to go through. And for them, it's always very complicated to investigate hours of rest and hours of work, because it requires an investment in investigation. They need to invest more. They need to cross-check a lot of information, which is sometimes going completely in opposite to what is required to have a checklist with a lot of items. So we see that also. So it's why we have a systemic, because all the layers are not functioning properly. So the way forward, at the end of the report, and you will see in the report when you will read it, we have a full list of recommendations, but I will just bring some of them only. One thing is very much to explore stringent, objective, research-based models for determining safe manning. Safe manning has been very much highlighted by all respondents as the key issue to unlock. From this, a lot of elements can be addressed. So safe manning is really a very important element. Another important element addressed was also at the regulatory level. It was regulations themselves to align them with evidence-based research on fatigue, to make sure that the regulations are meeting the need of fatigue reduction, fatigue mitigation, and not increasing the level of fatigue. So here, this is the idea that we have in shipping, and we are the only sector like this with fishing to have a system which is based on 14 hours workday principle. Additionally, there is a very important element is for probably a lot of maritime stakeholders to keep this message, is very much to promote accurate reporting and to demand as much as possible, as practical, accurate reporting from seafarers, to really know, also for the shipping company to understand very much that there is a very serious problem. And we need for that also protective mechanisms for seafarers, which are reporting things which are sometimes unpleasant to read when you are on the shipping company side. And finally, for the enforcement agency, for the flag state and port state, they should really much review also the inspection regime, how and what is required during an inspection related to hours of work and hours of rest. And finally, it is requested for all companies, maritime education and training, insurance, etc., all the other stakeholders and maritime professionals to very much develop and support the implementation of fatigue mitigation tools in the maritime industry. So this is a very short, brief, very fast presentation of a very large report, and we really invite you to read the full report, to have a look also at the extensive list of recommendations. So I will give now back the floor to Katie. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raphael. So I would say that's kind of both shocking and predictable at the same time. And this is research that was undertaken well before the COVID pandemic. So I think if we consider that this is what was happening then and now consider the additional pressures on seafarers, it's something really serious. So let me now go to our panel. If I can introduce our distinguished guests. So we have Mark Dickinson, the General Secretary of Nautilus International, the global union representing maritime professionals. We have with us Oddrun Malterud from the Norwegian Union of Marine Engineers, who chairs the ITF Maritime Safety Committee. We have Brice Martin Castex. He is an administrator of maritime affairs and the head of implementation of instrument support at IMO, and he serves the subcommittee on implementation of IMO instruments. Then we have Captain Jeff Parfit from CHIRP, the confidential reporting program for aviation and maritime. He's also a professional mariner with a career spanning 4 decades and most latterly in the offshore sector. And then finally, Captain Kuba Szymanski, Secretary General of Intermanager and formerly a Merchant Navy officer and Marine Safety and Quality Superintendent. So let me start by saying to all of you, what's your reaction to the report? Were you surprised by the findings? Kuba.
Very quick answer, no, I'm not surprised. Thank you. Next one. No, I'll evaluate a bit, Katie. Thank you. I'm not surprised, obviously, because I do go to sea and I do investigate and I do read and I talk, and it would be absolutely silly to deny that. What I'm not surprised as well is that people who were investigating were able to actually pin the problem and get to the root causes. What surprises me, however, is the fact that hire and fire is not mentioned. The system we've got at the moment, where the seafarers are being hired for a contract and then not fired, but not maybe re-employed. And that's the biggest problem, because a lot of people will not put their head above the parapet, knowing that their very livelihood is on stake. And why do we expect anybody to actually go against the system when the system, as pointed out by researchers, has been rotten? So I think no surprises whatsoever. Thank you very much for doing this research. And now I think we've got no choice but to really read what is written in red, bold, and try to think where are the solutions? They are not that easy, actually. We need to get to the bottom of it and work together collaboratively to find the solution, to be part of a solution, not of the problem. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Kuba. Mark, would you like to add?
Yes, well, both you and Kuba have kind of nailed it. Am I surprised? No, but I still find it shocking when I see such a well-researched or authoritative report bringing all the various actors and those responsible together and presenting it in such a clear, concise way with clear recommendations. I did find that particularly shocking. Although, as Kuba has said, and you've also said, it's not really surprising because we've all the experts on this panel have been in this industry for many, many, many years. And so when you read something like this, you recognize the key aspects of it that from your own experience. So I've worked at sea, getting the job done was just part of the ethos, and getting the job done meant working beyond the limit often to keep the show on the road. We've as a union, we've been reminding our members of how they expose themselves by not complying with the regulations and reporting honestly and accurately their hours of work, and perhaps more importantly, from the point of view of the MLC, their minimum rest periods, because they leave themselves exposed to criminalisation if there is subsequently an investigation into the working hours and rest hours regimes on board a vessel involved in an incident. So for that reason alone, you have to be true to yourself. You have to record your rest and hours of work accurately and honestly. Otherwise, you'll have nowhere to go and nowhere to hide.
Thanks, Mark. Runa, briefly.
Yes, thank you, Katie. It's good to hear we have a common goal here and we should have some action point. But I think the title of the report is straight to the point. There is no other professional workers who has so many regulations to follow without ownership. And I think that is important to have in mind. And this report shows exactly what we have observed and highlighted as a safety issue for many, many years. So no surprise, but I needed confirmation we need in our future work. So thank you so much for excellent work here. Thank you.
Thank you. Brice.
Hi, thank you for organizing this wonderful event and making available such an important study. So on the clear question, was I surprised? Absolutely not. It doesn't mean though that we didn't need such a study. On the contrary, I think the timing has been absolutely perfect. It came before COVID. As the Dr. Dubianri was saying, the impact of COVID is surely worsening the whole process. But we need to have this study before COVID because people are not going to be able to say, oh, this is because of COVID. The situation was bad before and need to be addressed. So what is shown in the study is no surprise whatsoever, because definitely the issue of the working and rest and the safe manning is a very crucial matter and is so difficult to assess. The answer is not easy, and it's not a surprise that it is a problem both for flag and port state, because in their both capacities, they cannot deal with it. They don't have the proper tools, and it's very, very difficult in the current situation to reach a full compliance situation, because we are aiming at compliance, and port state are just, as we said, the second line of defense. So the problem is, of course, first at the flag level, and whether they delegate these responsibilities to others, such as arrows. So definitely not a surprise, and maybe later on, without being too metaphorical, I would compare the ship to a human, to an organism, a living organism, where the crew is the blood and oxygen, and we'll see what the problem lies. So no surprise.
Thank you. Jeff.
Hello. Well, when I first received the report, I thought it was excellent, and I still think it's excellent, as do many of my colleagues. I was not surprised by the findings, but rather saddened to have my opinion and that of many of my colleagues confirmed. I was interested to note that the report indicated that the root cause of violations and recording malpractices were insufficient manning levels, which resulted in excess hours being worked. And of course, the minimum safe manning certificate is the responsibility of the flag state. I was also interested to note from the report that the flag states do not always fulfill their responsibilities, nor do they ensure that ship owners carry out their duties with regards to efficient and sufficient manning of ships. I think what is particularly painful with this report is that this is the violation of existing hours of rest, and the hours that seafarers are legitimately supposed to or capable of working are already outrageous. And so it's an excellent report, which we fully intend to promulgate.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to jump straight into some questions, but I will ask you to be quite brief in your answers. I can see time ticking. So the first is to Oddruna. What are the short and long-term impacts of fatigue on seafarers? And do you think that the current regulations in terms of work and rest hours and manning levels are fit for purpose?
Yeah, I think you find all of that in the report, but let me make it short and with my own words here. Short term, safety risk. Long term, more safety risk. That is the answer. And also I would like to say that all ships and operation are individual, but the norm of the manning the ships owner make don't care. That's my opinion. And as we know, a sailor work and lives on board, and the minimum manning practical give them watch duties 24/7. This have a negative effect on the seafarer's condition and health. His colleague must keep an eye on it, take over more responsibility, and eventually everyone is exhausted and sailing around like a ticking bomb. Seafarer is not for everyone, but it's quite possible to think safety before money. Manning a ship with the right competence in a 3-watch system and make sure they can get off when necessary. I think it's important to have in mind. But what more can I say in 1 minute? But you can read the full ITF statement on this in the ITF report behind the limit. And also, I would like to give you the attention to Forbes article about Vacasio accident. Thank you.
Thank you, Odd. Let me jump straight on to Brice. How could you explain the implementation failures of flag state survey and port state control in this particular topic? And what do you think is the role of the IMO in strengthening the implementation of such regulations? Brice, I think you're muted and not by me.
Yeah. 3 minutes really is going to be challenging. So thank you for these questions. What went wrong? As I said, I wanted to make a comparison with the human body. I mean, it's easy to fix a broken arm. Now we are talking about far more complex disease and pathologies. We talk about stress, we talk about things, and this is a lot more complicated to assess. And the flag state and the port state, they may not have the tools, they don't have the time, they may not have the expertise. So we have really to rethink entirely the kind of responsibilities to people in the profession, whether they are flag state or port state representative or recognized organization, if this work is delegated to them. And we have to make sure that in these different bodies, there are people with the experience, because we have naval architects, we have a lot of very competent people. Maybe we don't have enough seafarers in the administration, because maybe they are the ones who are really able to understand what are the working conditions. I don't know about the future, but we have a shortage of seafarers. When all the ships are automated, it's going to be even worse, but I won't see it for sure. So we will need to have make sure that the people are able to understand. Now the tools, it was striking to see that there is a software which is helping people basically to cheat. There should be, I hope, a software which is really helping when you decide for a minimum safe manning certificates. I hope people can enter with kind of trade, with kind of cargo, with kind of areas they are sailing, and then to have a button to push and to see this is a safe manning certificate. I'm not sure that our genius IT people have really looked into that, but I may be wrong. Now, I'm not going to just explain what went wrong. I tried really now to focus more on what can we do and the benefit of having this study now. Very practical. I attended the Paris MOU committee meeting, and you know, they organized concentrated inspection campaign most of the time together with the Tokyo MOU. It was supposed to be 2021 on STCW. It is now postponed to 2022. And IMO Secretary joined the task force. And currently the questionnaire only one question related to hours of rest and work. So we are going to work with them and take some of the recommendation of the report straight into the Paris MOU task force to try to get something out of it. Another thing, and the Secretary General of IMO is very keen on trying to get as much as possible from casualty investigation. And thanks to some panelists here who are helping us to collect some data, we really have to work with professional like the MAIF, you know, which is a Marine Accident Investigators International Forum, because these people are able to pick the information straight where the casualties are. And even more importantly, to try to get more information from near misses, because I think that the issue, it's too late when the casualty has occurred, and there is a lot of information that I see people from CHERP will be able to talk about that. So we need to bring more information, because casualty analysis is a way out. And at this level, I would say, don't forget the fishers. I mean, we talk STCW, but SCCWF and the situation on board fishing vessel is a lot worse. So what we can do, I have here the, as you know, the IMO is a machinery to produce paper. We have the resolution. A resolution is not enough, because when you go to SOLAS, this resolution is a footnote. And as everyone knows, it is not mandatory. I think there is maybe a process, and it's not secretariat, there is no official view of IMO, but personally speaking, I really think that there should be an output proposed somewhere to try to review this 2011, I think it was 2011 resolution, and to develop this kind of instrument, which IMO has managed to do recently, which is basically to have a mandatory part and a recommendatory part. I think there should be a code, like we have the ARO code, III code, or casualty investigation, with very basic principle for the safe manning, which should be mandatory under SOLAS and else, and then a recommendatory part. And I think that I'm going to stop here, already went beyond, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, please. I must say it's very cheering to hear the IMO so receptive to this report, and with practical suggestions such as the Paris MOU, CICs, and so on. So thanks for that. And I think that leads nicely into casualty investigation and Captain Jeff Parfitt. The aim of your organisation is to collect confidential feedback from ships. Is the problem of fatigue and violation of work and rest hours regularly highlighted by seafarers? And how can your organisation participate in improving the situation? Jeff.
Okay, well, CHERP Maritime is a near-miss organisation, and we exist to harvest safety reports, near-miss safety reports, directly from the seafarer, reports that are not sanitised by company SMS systems. And in many cases, fatigue does not come up as a discussion point or as part of a near miss, although I would say the COVID effect is now becoming more apparent. We take on a report from a reporter, we liaise with the company, but we have absolutely no regulatory authority. We simply highlight learnings and good practices, and then we put it back out there, usually through our publications of lessons learned from these near misses. We did have a campaign last year to encourage reporting of hours of rest issues, and we did receive some reports, although not nearly enough to represent the true picture as outlined here. I think the lack of response is reflected in this report, which highlights the reluctance of seafarers to correctly complete the required paperwork. Essentially, the hours of rest record is seen as just another piece of paper to complete on the already overburdened seafarer. It is seen as a pointless exercise that has no impact and or results in grief for the master or the crew. But we've received comments such as, when I reported deficiencies in hours of rest, I was told, you're not managing your time properly, or if you can't do it, we'll find someone who will, usually on the telephone. We have, however, had interesting reports from harbour towage sector where dangerous work patterns were reported. When we challenged the regulator on the matter, it turned out they had issued a dispensation as legally permitted, allowing an unfavourable variation to the hours of rest agreement, which we found incredible. How we could help improve it? Well, we will promulgate this report and it will headline our December feedback publication, which is written for the seafarer with the usual distribution of around 60,000 hard copies, plus over 50,000 digital copies. We also translate it into Chinese and Filipino, and it's always available from our website. We welcome the interaction with the IMO and ILO and continue to push the safety message directly to the seafarers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to jump straight to Kubo. This study flags up some serious problems of misunderstanding or mistrust between ship and shore staff. How can we enhance the relationship between ship and shore to ensure quality feedback? And do you think that companies are taking record reporting seriously?
Well, obviously the report says then we are not taking that seriously, then we are not acting on it. Seafarers are talking to us if they are brave enough, and we are not taking much notice. What can be done? Well, $1 million question, I suppose, because when you talk to chief executives of every company, they would basically say it's not happening with us. We are the best. We've got our audits. We go on board. We are, we are the best. So where the problem really is, well, I think it's the problem with reading and trying to understand. I usually say that the best auditors on board of the ships are seafarers. There's no point employing consultants, spending a lot of money to find out what's wrong with my company. Just go on board, sail with the vessel, not just visit in port, sail for 2-3 days. Try to really understand what's going on with your own people. And there is an old adage, if you look after your people, people will look after your business. And it's such a simple thing, but it's not happening at the moment. I would also draw attention to salary levels. Very few seafarers would like to work for IMO. Very few seafarers would like to work for the shipping company. I mean ashore, because the difference in salaries are huge. We seafarers are earning pretty good money. And if you go ashore and you start working for very little money, then your family starts screaming. Is it popular what I'm saying now? Not really. But look at universities, academies, look at the flag state offices. The salaries there are not tempting good seafarers to actually drop seafaring career and go and work ashore. So, and we have seen that for many, many years now, up to the breaking point, I'm afraid. So organizations like our NGOs, I mean Intertanko, Intercargo, Intermanager, ICS, BIMCO, we are trying to encourage our members to actually listen. If you think about the project which Intermanager did called MARTA on fatigue, that was a huge undertaking. And have we really moved? It was sponsored by ourselves. Well, TK Foundation gave a lot of money, but members of Intermanager participated to provide seafarers. And have we really taken it on board? Some did, some are working well ahead, but majority of the industry does not. So for us, it is probably educate, 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 cooperate and work together with flag states, because you heard me saying that safe manning levels are incredible at the moment, because it is a race down. It's the race among the flag states, companies even I'm calling them now, to do better than the others, because owners are pushing. If you don't give me 14 people, then I'll go somewhere else where I can sail the vessel without cook, for example. Sad, but hey, there is a hope. Thank you for this report again. Having a very scientific background now and big companies behind, I think we can make a change, and I sincerely hope we will make a change. Thank you.
Thank you, Kuba. I think you're right, and I think there does appear to be an appetite to collaborate and to work together and cooperate on this, but it's been around for such a long time that I think we also have to get into enforcement and make sure that it's not a race to the bottom, and it's something that has some teeth somewhere along the lines to pick it up. But I won't speak any further. Mr. Mark Dickinson, what is the role of trade unions in addressing the issue of fatigue and strengthening the implementation of the rest and work hours instruments? Is this an industrial relations issue, or is there any appetite to address the problems highlighted in the report with shipping companies?
Of course, it is an industrial relations issue, and it has been an industrial relations issue, and the unions have been active highlighting and promoting these issues and awareness of these issues, as Oddruna has already highlighted, within whatever opportunity we have, the IMO, the ILO, within Europe and the EU, in sectoral social dialogue. These issues are bread and butter issues that we work on every single day. What's frustrating, of course, is that we are up against all of the various components outlined in the report, whether it be flag states, port states, ship owners, clearly not the ones that are members of Kuba's organization. It's always very refreshing to listen to Kuba because he leads from the front and speaks with passion as a former seafarer. If one ever is a former seafarer, once a seafarer, always a seafarer is what I say. But the point you made about a race to the bottom is one I want to highlight, because I think at the end of the day, the flag states, they rock up to the IMO and they debate the issues. And it seems to me that it doesn't matter what the evidence says or what the research points to. There is always a suspicion that this is all about cost. It's about ship owners' needs. It's about flag states' needs. Let's call them out for what they are. Flags of convenience. They're the ones who drive standards down. They're the ones who impact on national flags. Everybody is caught up in the same game, which is looking at your toes. What is the lowest we can get away with to attract ships to our register? Now, you say, what can the unions do about it? Of course, we will engage, we will negotiate with companies. I'll take your report, I'll give it to every single one of my collective bargainers, and I'll say, get that on the table of every shipping company that we're talking to. And I know what the response is going to be. Yes, we agree. Yes, absolutely, it's difficult, but the IMO says it's 98 hours. The ILO says it's 91 hours. If we do this, Panama grows, Marshall Islands grows, Liberia grows. And we're talking jobs. You know, the culture that is driven here, where the seafarers basically go along with it, get the job done, flog their hours of work and rest, just to keep the thing moving, is driven by that inconvenient truth. It starts at the top. The fish rots from the head first. That's where we've got to address this problem. And I'm absolutely sure that Oddruna would agree with me. The unions, the ITF, the ETF in Europe, we will take this to the appropriate place and we'll slam this report on the table. And we're going to say, where are you going to hide now?
Thank you. Now I feel like we should have invited a flag state to come back, and we haven't. So we've got poor Brice sitting there, shaking his head as I am. Listen, what I'm going to do now is thank you. So thank you very much for all your contributions. I would really like to jump into a couple of questions in the last few remaining minutes. I have one here from Christian Roos. How can electronic recording programs be approved to be officially used if they include tools and possibilities to falsify the correct recording of rest hours? How can this happen? Who can I ask that to? Actually, I'm going to ask Jeff.
Thank you very much, Katie, for that. I would say, as somebody who is not too long ashore, I am somebody who also filled those forms in just to make life a lot easier. How you would actually use an electronic system, it would have to be very sophisticated, you know, sort of a touch card type device where every time the seafarer turned to, he had to touch something that automatically recorded his hours on and off. So quite a sophisticated system would have to be introduced. Sort of, you know, passenger ships have that kind of technology for their security, that sort of thing. But the average run-of-the-mill ship, it would have to be a across-the-board investment. You know, so it is possible. The technology is there, and it is a.
Please, can I ask you, what do you think? And also a follow-up. How about a penalty mechanism for punishing principals for rest hours adjusting? Do you think that's something that could be put into regulation?
You're asking me, right?
Yes.
Well, first of all, on the idea of this is an issue which has been in other transport sector. I mean, it has been aviation, it is road. So this is not an issue which is specific to the maritime sector. And I'm sure that technology managed to address that for trucks, for example. Surely there can be a way to do it for the maritime sector if this is really the wish. Penalties, yes, but you reach to the level of penalties when it is too late. I mean, it's far more interesting to make people feel that it is good to be good and to have incentives. By the way, IMO is not flag. Huh? Luckily, we are representing states in all their capacities, and we are really privileged to have a big network of IGOs and NGOs and seafarer representation, and thanks to ITF to be so active in IMO debates. So the penalties, for example, it's complicated. You take a port state, what they are going to do? They are going to detain the ship, which is always bad in a port because it blocks the quay. They are going to be challenged because assessing whether the crew is tired or not is going to be complicated. I mean, it is very, very subjective. There may be means. I mean, you have to look at the fact people now are discussing, for example, slowing down the ships. Maybe this is something which is combined with the issue of lack of rest, maybe an option. I'm not keen on penalties. I think you need a mixture of everything. And IMO luckily has the power of going regulatory, but also helping, harmonizing and helping for the implementation. And we have all our member states in all their capacities and all the support of IGO and NGO to help us achieve that. So the rules need to change, mandatory and recommendatory. I agree with that.
Thank you. Raphael, what do you think about penalties?
Penalties is one of the elements that we had in the report. I mean, I will not very much disclose what we have in the report, but we will invite you to read the report. It would be good for you. But penalties can be an incentive, can be something, I mean, can trigger some action, but all the question is, who are you going to penalize? Are you going to penalize again the same victims, or are you going to find other ways? So it's a very complicated debate, and I think probably also here there is an extended discussion that should be brought somewhere, maybe to the ILO, because here there is different, I mean, groups which are interacting. I mean, it's more a tripartite types of discussion, but I think it could be a good possibility, a solution, but who to penalize and which level of penalization to make it like something deterrent and not something which is completely forgotten. So it's a lot of discussion, but it's still a very important and I think relevant discussion. But the president has something to say, maybe.
Thank you, Raphael, and just picking up from there. I don't necessarily know if you know, it's not the need for new regulations, because I think all of the regulations are in place. It is, in my view, about implementation, effective implementation. And the question that I see is how can we ensure better effective implementation of the two instruments, because the two, you know, IMO, STCW, the provisions, hours of rest, ILO, the provisions relating to hours of work. And in a way, in a sense that they're divided between two institutions, sort of enables, you know, you can walk around the hoop. In the case of the ILO, there are the elements clearly can, if they are, if seafarer organizations, and that seafarer, in my view, a couple of recommendations I want to make. We need to have our seafarer organizations be more active in when their countries submit reports in terms of compliance. The problem is it probably becomes a national thing rather than, because flag states are unfortunately not necessarily the ones that turn up have to prepare the report that goes and have to face the music because the ships are flagged elsewhere. But they should be facing that music. But I think more it is about how can we, what strategies can be pursued for more effective implementation. And there, of course, port state control has a major role to play. And one of the things that comes out of that report is probably if we had more effective, again, they go in, they have so many things to look after, and therefore it is, the amount of items that they have to review, part of the problem becomes, you know, having to focus on issues like, you know, like seafarers, to what extent do you have, they can find actually discrepancies in seafarers' hours of work and hours of rest. So there is, I mean, more effective port state control, focusing on, I know that at certain times they have done, over a period of after 10 years, they've done some kind of concentrated inspection campaign on hours of work. That has happened sometimes, but they're so few and far between. What happens in the middle of all of that time when they go back again 10 years later or 5 years later to port state control, focusing on hours of work and hours of rest? So I think the two organizations somehow have to come together in my view, because they both have regulations relating one more hours of rest, low hours of work. How do we, you can cut across those two hoops actually quite easily. So how is it that we can make that more effective between Greece still in IMO and allow people that could take this forward at this stage or take it up as a very important issue? Having seen COVID impact, I think this should be one of those things to be discussed. I don't think you need new regulations. I think you need effective discussions that create for better enforcement of the requirements.
Thanks, Cleo. Good point. Something linked from Abdul Ghani Sarang, General Secretary of the National Union of Seafarers of India. There's a race to the bottom where safe manning is considered okay with utter disregard to operational manning. Why does the IMO not make it mandatory for seafarers associations to be part of the procedures of deciding manning and lay more emphasis on operational manning rather than the safe manning? Sorry, Brice, back to you.
Well, I don't know whether the question is about when we deal with developing the rules for safe manning or when it is to be done at the ship level. Of course, when we are developing the rules, luckily seafarers are represented and their input is very valued. And I totally agree what Dr. Dubiari was saying. But I just want to say that maybe we should need to push a little bit more on the safe manning to make it a little bit more mandatory than it is currently in IMO regulations. At a ship level, I mean, IMO cannot really step in. This is a decision. It is a sovereignty of the flag state to have the process. We can have recommendation, and we could be referring to the Seafarer Association at the national level to be involved. You could ask a lot of things. You could ask, for example, the shipyards. When a ship is being designed, I believe that the people designing the ship should really give clear indication of how it should be run, how many people are needed to do the operations. So there may be an association of knowledge, expertise, and through the manning process, which is not once in a life. It has to be reviewed. As we know, sometimes ships are being automated and then 5 years down the line, automation doesn't work so well. So all that should be reviewed, I think. And but definitely, yes, involvement of seafarers at a national level, we could recommend that. And they are part of the discussion at IMO, of course, and thanks to ITF and others.
Thank you, Brice. Okay, so our time is up. We're at 6 minutes past 3. I sneakily pushed it towards slightly over the edge. So thank you very much, especially to our panelists. Thank you for making yourselves available. Thank you to Raphael and to WMU for making this webinar possible and for all the hard work on the research. Let me just finish by saying the full report is available on the ITF Seafarers Trust website. I'm sure it's also available on the World Maritime University website. Please do download it and share it widely. From my perspective, I think it's been really useful, and we have a huge amount of work to do to try and get some teeth into this debate that's been around forever. So thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.